Hi, Carl here for ProAV and today is a very exciting day because Panasonic have finally shared all of the information on their new flagship full-frame mirrorless cameras, the S1 and the S1R. And not only that, but I have a full working model here for us to do some filming with. We've been filming in this kitchen all day with it, and so we can finally share some footage with you as well as our overall first impressions of filming with the camera. And I've got to say, I'm really impressed and been enjoying my time with the camera so far. Now, we're not going to talk about all of the information in this video because there's just so much to talk about there, but I have written a blog post which goes into a lot more detail on each of the things they announced, which is going to be a link to that down in the description of this video. So head on over to our blog if you want to know all the nitty-gritty details. But in this video, I'm just going to focus down on some of the main highlights, the interesting areas for us in the video world. There are two models, the S1 and the S1R. The S1 has a 24.2 megapixel sensor, whereas the S1R has a higher resolution 47.3 megapixel sensor. Now, we always guessed that the S1 would be the video orientated of the two cameras, but we've really confirmed that here with the full specs. The S1 is definitely the model to focus on if you're primarily interested in the video specs. And a lot of that is simply because it's so much easier to get good quality 4K video signals from a lower resolution sensor than it is from a higher resolution sensor. If you're downsampling a sensor of that size and that resolution, that takes an awful lot of processing power that could be used for other things, like giving us 60p, giving us 10-bit, all of that sort of stuff. One of the most important parts of these cameras is the new Venus processing engine, which is what has enabled Panasonic to get a lot of those features that they had on their smaller sensor cameras like the GH5 and the GH5S into this full frame camera body. So the S1 is capable of 4K video up to 30 frames a second in 10-bit using the full width of its full frame sensor, which is just fantastic to get internal 10-bit 4K recording onto its own SD cards in a small little mirrorless camera like this. That is fantastic news. You can get up to 4K up to 60 frames a second, but for that you need to go down to 8-bit and you need to crop in a little bit into the sensor to go to an APS-C sized crop. Now you can get 10-bit and 4K 60p at the same time, but for that you need to use the HDMI output. And I wasn't quite clear from Panasonic's presentation whether or not that used the full width of the full frame sensor or whether that was an APS-C sized crop. I wasn't quite sure, so we're going to have to wait to play with this a bit more until we can figure that one out. We do get Vlog and we get 180 frames a second if you're in 1080p and a crop mode. Now, there were two things that did disappoint me from Panasonic's press release though. The first one is that all of that 10-bit recording and the Vlog is in an optional paid upgrade for the camera. You don't get that if you just buy the body of the camera. You need to purchase a separate license key in order to be able to get 10-bit or Vlog. It's not the end of the world, at least the camera can do it, but it would have been nice if that was included with the camera as you buy it. The other one for me was that there was no 400 megabits a second all-I codec that we were used to seeing on the GH5 and on the EVA 1. I'm sure this is just down to processing power, but it is fantastic on the GH5 to be able to choose between long GOT recording or all-I recording. And on this camera, at least for the moment, unless it's something they can add in the future, at the moment you are stuck to 150 megabits a second in long GOT recording or their H.265 mode as well. So you do get some options, but you don't get that 400 megabits a second all-eye recording that is a really nice feature of the GH5 or the either one. So all of this is recorded onto two memory card slots. We've got an XQD card slot and we've got an SDXC card slot. And there's also a new battery system. So this is a new battery that Panasonic have designed. We haven't seen this one on anything before. And it's a lot larger and a lot chunkier than the GH5 batteries. And certainly the battery life from the little that we've been using it today has seemed fantastic. So I've got high hopes for this new battery system. Hopefully that's going to be a fantastic addition. The camera does use contrast-based autofocus technology, which is lacking behind a little bit in terms of the video world, behind some of its competitors like Canon's EOS R or Sony's A7 III, cameras like that. Most of those use more advanced autofocus technology when it's orientated at video. The reason I say when it's aimed at video is because actually in stills, contrast space is really good. This has very, very fast stills focusing. But for video, the main problem with contrast-based autofocus is that no matter how good you make it, it's always going to have to go past the subject and come back to it a little bit until it can tell what is in focus and what isn't. That's just a limitation of the technology. And Panasonic have done a great job of making this as good as it possibly can be, but there's no getting around the fact that it is still contrast-based autofocus. The feature I'm most pleased to see transition over from the GH5 is the in-camera stabilization. It's a complete redesign of the one that's in the GH5 because it's a larger full-frame sensor, but they say they've managed to get exactly the same performance that we're used to on the GH5. They're saying 5.5 stops of stabilization in camera, and if you pair it with the right lens, you get up to 6 stops of stabilization. And from playing around with it today, I'm really impressed. We've done a lot of shots handheld and I think it does a fantastic job. So most of the footage you're going to see from today's shoot is going to have been handheld. The other feature that I'm very pleased to see inherited from the GH5 is that the XLR add-on box for the top still works here, which just makes your life so much easier in a professional video environment. You can get proper preamps and proper XLR microphones into a camera this size with just a simple little add-on box there without any extra cables, which is very, very handy indeed. The EVF is also very impressive. It's a 5.7 million dot OLED screen and it is brilliant. It's very large, very clear when you're holding it up to your eye, and it's really easy to use. It makes it very simple to get focus and to judge exposure. And as most of you that have been watching this channel for a while will know, one of my favorite ways to use small cameras like this is to hold it up to your eye and up to your face in a stills photography manner and shoot video through that. It allows you to be very small, very lightweight, very quick on your feet, and I find it makes me more creative as a filmmaker running around like that, particularly for any sort of fast-paced, run-and-gun, uncontrolled environment style of shooting. And a high-quality EVF like this really, really does make a difference. Now, there's been a lot of talk online about the screen because it's not a flip-out style like on the GH5 or the GH5S. It's a tilt like we see on the Sony line of cameras, their A7 line. But with this one, has got a third axis of movement and it can tilt away from the camera there, so that if you're interviewing or something like that, you can see the LCD screen from the side of the camera. And it's fine, it's absolutely nice, and the actual screen itself is very, very high quality, it's really clear, and it's an RGBW screen, which is an interesting little piece of technology. I won't talk too long about it, but essentially what that means is that you've got an extra layer of pixels which are white, which gives you some more brightness and a bit more punch. So that should be really useful for trying to see that screen when you're outdoors. Of course, you've got the EVF for outdoors, which is always going to be the best way to monitor your image when you're outside. But in case you need to step back and look at the screen, that extra punch on the LCD screen will make a big difference. Panasonic say the reason they haven't given us a flip out screen is because of weather sealing, because the weather sealing on these cameras is absolutely fantastic. And Panasonic are saying it's about as good as you can possibly really get on a stills camera like this. Now obviously they can't get it officially rated as being sort of waterproof and things like that because it's an interchangeable lens camera, and surprisingly there's a hole on the front of it where you put the lens. But once you've got one of their lenses attached, it is very well sealed. They say it is splash, dust and freeze proof down to -10 degrees, which is very impressive, and the entire thing feels very solid and very rugged. It's a magnesium alloy chassis and it really feels like it. It's a very nice camera to use ergonomically. It feels very solid and robust in your hand, and it definitely feels like a professional body that can take a bit of a beating. So let me all know what you think of the full detail release specs from Panasonic down in the comment section down below. And remember to go have a little look at our blog if you want some more in-depth thoughts than what I've been able to share with you in this video. Also, let me know what you think of the footage. It'd be great to get all your thoughts on that. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to buy one of these or pre-order it, head over to our website. And of course, I'll see you in the next one.